Hello, Mordarim here. In today's video I want to show you a new take on the Landslide skill. We are not going to look at Trample Slide or Werebear Slide, but the Earthbender Slide featuring companions. On paper this should be one of the strongest versions of Landslide existing, featuring hundreds of millions of DPS, instantly deleting bosses and potentially dominating the endgame pit, just like the Werebear builds. But all of this is only on paper. We have no actual proof of concept here. If you still want to try something new, stick with me. Otherwise, look for a more refined build that is already proven to work. In the background you will see the Werebear version of this build by a fellow Druid player, clearing a pit to 100. So it is certainly possible, and this one is unoptimized in the Werebear build. I think the Earthbender build will be much stronger. The video will be linked down below so you can check out this channel. Now remember to check the written guide on Mobalytics. It provides you with a detailed section for each topic, explaining how to boss your defenses, scale your damage and how to transition to different phases. You also have multiple tabs for level brackets which come with additional notes and aspects as well as stat recommendations. With Season 4 we see quite a bit changed, especially Spirit Generation and Sustain for the Druid will become much easier. The much needed addition of the Spirit per second effects on helmet, chest and boots will make for an amazing early game where we barely will have to use our basic skills. Really good for the Landslide build. We will also see the addition of a new unique, making it possible to exponentially scale our damage through a double cast, additional crit multipliers and additional procs of Landslide pillars after using Landslide, which will repeat over and over again because those are recursive. There is no internal cooldown on this one, so you technically can press one button and then Landslide, a Landslide, which will proc a Landslide, which will proc a Landslide, which will proc a Landslide, and so on and so forth. It's really amazing on paper because we don't actually know if there is an internal cooldown on this one for the hyper endgame. Nothing is specified on the item and on the affix. Now, this combined with a ton of ways to stun enemies through other tempered affixes will guarantee 100% crit strike chance because of a regular skill, despite not having a crit strike chance of 100%. This further allows us to stack lucky hit chance, which will proc Earthen Might, which will enable us to obliterate, on paper, bosses with hundreds of millions of DPS. And we're going to use companions, which will see rigorous use due to clarity. Now, companions not only boost our damage through Shepherd's Aspect, but also through clarity, which was changed to now provide 5% more damage and crit chance per rank, of the passive stacking up to 3 times. We can further stack clarity through tempers, which can get you 9 ranks. Yes, 45% crit chance and 45% more damage per use of a companion ability. At 3 uses, we are looking at a massive and absolutely staggering 135% more multiplier and 100% crit chance. This is additionally to all the ways we already scale our damage. And we now also have easy access to 100% attack speed. If anything has taught me anything, it was League of Legends AD carry. Scaling into endgame using those mechanics and becoming ridiculously powerful. This is basically the same concept. So Season 4 is looking extremely nice for the Earthbender Landslide. Now if you like what I do and want to support me, make sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you have not already. I cover all sorts of RPG, speed, strategy, CRPG on the channel in form of extensive guides. So thank you very much for supporting me and let's dive into the meat. So as always you can find a fully written guide with multiple tabs for leveling, endgame basic, endgame soft uber and endgame Harlequin uber, because we are going to look at multiple stages and transitions for this build on Mobalytics, with detailed descriptions for when to unlock spirit boons, the defenses, scaling your damage and leveling all in one neat planner. Now, let's first talk about the concept behind this build. First up, we're going to look at one skill tree node, the primal Landslide. When we immobilize or stun an enemy, we get a terror mode, which we can use to guarantee a critical strike with our Landslide. It is exceptionally easy to stun enemies now because we have the temper lucky hit chance to stun enemies for 2 seconds. We can get this one on the helmet, we can get this one on our chest, on our gloves, we can get this one even on our amulets and so on and so forth, but we don't. Those 3 are enough. So we are guaranteeing critical strikes through that already. But we also have clarity, which is a changed node down below here that basically tells you that it scales your damage massively with crit strike chance and skill damage, a more multiplier. And we additionally are using Earthen Might with a ton of lucky hit chance. We have it on our amulet, we have it on our gloves, we have it on our offhand, and we also have it in our Paragon Board with 20% here. This has multiple uses. First up, Earthen Might, proccing spirit recovery and guaranteed crit strikes. But we also have our pack leader node here. On a critical strike, we have a lucky hit chance of 20% chance to reset the cooldown of our companion skills. We boost this one. And the best thing is we double cast with a very high chance. We have on our weapon temper the chance for landslide projectiles to cast twice. On our offhand, the same thing. And then we have the Earthbreaker unique, which states summoning a land pillar in a tectonic spike has a 30% chance to cause an extra landslide pillar to spawn in the spikes. There is no cooldown on this one. So we cast landslide, we can double cast it. Each of those pillars has a 30% chance to cast more landslides, and those also seem to have a chance to cast more pillars. So you can basically, as in World of Warcraft, back when you can cast your Stormstrike and your Stormstrike procs Wind Fury, and your Wind Fury could proc on your Wind Fury and you obliterate enemies with one hit, because the same concept applies here. There is no internal cooldown, specifically because I'm looking at this one and thinking they don't have implemented one. If they did, if they thought about this interaction, it basically lowers the insane trillion billion damage the build can do to hundreds of millions. It's still going to blast and completely destroy enemies. Because as far as I'm aware, stacking your clarity and then double casting this one is an extra effect. And it's repeating and repeating and repeating. And it should inherit the more multipliers, technically. And don't forget, we are also using Aftershock. So you have your repeated landslides, and those repeated landslides can repeat again and so on. So everything is like over the top with hundreds of landslides spawning. The biggest problem with this build is you need to hardcast your landslides, so you need a ton of attack speed. So you have your attack speed on your weapon, and on this weapon, and on this ring. And you might think that's not enough. But with greater FXS, we can cap our attack speed with just those three, because we get a little bit on the Paragon Board, and that's enough to get us 100% attack speed. And don't forget, you have stuff like Calm Before the Storm with lucky hits, so this one should constantly proc, and you're going to reset your Petrify cooldown very, very often, because they changed this one also quite a bit, how this one works. We have Supreme Petrify. Killing an enemy that is affected by Petrify reduces its cooldown by 1. Hitting a boss reduces its cooldown by 10 seconds. The cooldown is 50 seconds with a little bit of cooldown reduction, which we can easily get now. We can get this one to very, very, very low cooldown. So you basically always have Petrify up. We press Petrify and then we obliterate entire screens with our landslides. Because Poison Creeper is going to also spawn landslides with subterranean aspects, which does more damage to poisoned enemies, and we have retaliation aspect because we are constantly fortified, and we have the Shepherd's aspect as well as the Stampede aspect, which will get us our multiplier. Because you need to think about the Shepherd's aspect like this. You have 135% more multiplier on the amulet. Then you have your retaliation multiplier, which is 30%. So this multiplies to 135 multiplier, and it's around 178%. So it's basically the same as having this one on a weapon, on a two-handed weapon. But we now can fit one additional more multiplier for example, Stampede or retaliation, and we get the stats on the offhand. We want the cooldown reduction, we want the additional hit chance, the lucky hit chance, and the additional cooldown reduction here. And we can get a 1.1 or 1.11 attack speed base modifier, which we can scale with a more attack speed, which is insane. And this is probably better than just going with the regular two-handed weapon. Additionally, we are using Tybalt's Will, which you can proc with Bulwark, regenerate a little bit of primary resource, and get an increase to our damage, which is 20% on our pants. Now, then we have Yen's Blessing, which has an 8-second cooldown, but we now have a chance to cast our Poison Creeper or Wolves or Ravens, which will proc Clarity, which is 45% more damage on the next cast of our Landslide, and we naturally have a chance to cast Poison Creeper, which will proc our Subterranean aspect and cast landslides all around. So that's the basic concept. But if you don't like Yen's Blessing and want more movement speed and other stats, you can actually just scrap Yen's Blessing and then grab the aspect of Concussive Strikes to get a 20% lucky hit chance to daze enemies and then deal 20% increased damage to them, so a 20% more multiplier, which we are now going to utilize in the Endgame Soft Uber unique transition, which now uses aspect of Concussive Strikes with movement speed, so we have more movement speed, we have more spirit generation because we're going to use the Godslayer Crown. On a stun, freeze or immobilize or damaging a boss, we are going to suck in any enemy inside and we deal more damage to them for 3 seconds. This can occur every 12 seconds, so technically this will result in much better burst damage. And we are not losing the spirit per second. Now for our gear stats, mainly we are looking for spirit per second, life and armor on our stuff, lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable, to have a basically guaranteed chance to make enemies vulnerable. This is a 20% more multiplier. Combined with ranks to landslides, we want to masterwork this one as high as possible. We have earth damage instead of close damage or distant damage. We don't want to actually face enemies, so the earth damage is quite nice to have because if enemies get to us, we have not reduced damage. Otherwise, on our weapon, we want to have damage to crowd control damage because we want to somehow increase our more multiplier even higher. Technically, we can exchange all of our earth damage to this, but this will lower the DPS we deal to bosses. But with this setup, we have a kind of hybrid approach to this one and can benefit from both worlds. Then we have movement speed, spirit per second, maximum life. We have movement speed, lucky hit chance, and ranks to Envenom. We have bonus ranks to Clarity. And if we don't have the Ring of Starless Skies, which results in more consistent damage, and then looking at the aspect of Retaliation instead, we have bonus to Clarity also here, which results in the 9 ranks to Clarity. For offhand, we have attack speed, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, and again on both the weapon 1 and weapon 2, we have chance for landslide projectors to cast twice. Resource cost reduction is also important, attack speed, willpower, so all of those are great. But the imprint to have landslide proc twice is really good. Next, where can you get the Earthbreaker unique? This one is found from Gregory. So the dude in the big armor that's constantly spawning red lightning, that's the one you need to farm for the Earthbreaker unique. And before we move on to the Paragon Board, we want to look at the caps, resistances through resistance gems. It should be really easy to get. If you're struggling to get this one, you should get one defensive poison resistance here, shadow resistance here, or later on you can switch this one to the boots instead and have your Godslayer crown instead of the ballistic aspect. But also very important, 9230 armor is very much needed for the split to function versus enemies level 100 or higher, because this cap will provide you with an 85% physical damage mitigation versus those enemies. And that's about it for defenses. You can read up on this down below in the defense section right here. Now let's have a look at the Paragon tree. We are looking at a very similar setup to our Pulverize build. In the first one, we have our Tectonic glyph, which will provide us with lucky hit chance and crit strike damage. Then we have the Spirit glyph in the heightened Malice board, which will provide us with a more multiplier for crit strikes and more crit strike damage. Then we go to the Constricted Tendrils, which will give us the Territorial Glyph. This will provide us with 50% DR versus close enemies, much needed. Then we move on to the Urban Devastation board, pick up Outmatch for a more multiplier. We will also increase our willpower and crit strike damage through those nodes. Same with the resistances, much needed for this build. Then we unlock the Inner Beast node, grab Undaunted for a 10% damage reduction and more damage while fortified. Then we path to the Ancestral Guidance board above the Urban Devastation glyph board and grab Ancestral Guidance for a 30% more multiplier. And then we path down below to the Heightened Malice board, which we unlocked at the very start of the game for poison resistance to cap our poison resistance and for Heightened Malice for a 45% more damage multiplier when 3 or more enemies are poisoned nearby. Then we fill out the blanks, like for example crit strike damage with earth skills and stuff like crit strike damage versus crowd controlled enemies. Another very important thing to grab are the damage reduction nodes here. So those provide you with around 16 to 70% less damage taken from damage over time. A very strong node here with all resistance. So grab this one if you're struggling with damage over time. Now, this sums up the video. If you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also support me some more by joining the channel membership, which will allow me to keep making videos. So thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye.